Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. If you're watching this on one of my three YouTube channels, X or Rumble, you'll see the title of his former book. We're going to talk about two books today. The first one is Gray Day, My Undercover Mission to Expose America's First Cyber Spy. And it's a story I've been interested in. It's about Robert Hansen, two S's, Hanssen. But what's great about this is a first person account. You literally have a guy who was involved in catching this master spy that did really nefarious stuff. And we can talk about that. This wasn't just kind of like a guy who, might have sold some information. The information led to people's demise. So he also has a new book. It's Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. So we're going to talk about that at the end. But the book's really fascinating. It has excellent reviews. There's multiple different formats you can check it out. I think it was published in 2021. Then his new book came out just late last year, is my understanding. But I'm glad to have him on the show. So Eric O'Neill, welcome to the show.
William, it's great to be here, and I love talking about my books. And today is just a perfect time to talk about Gray Day and the Hansen case, because yesterday, February 18th, was the 25-year anniversary of his arrest. So 25 years ago and one day, the FBI arrested Robert Hansen right outside of Foxstone Park in Vienna, Virginia. So it's a day that my family and I we mark every year on our calendar.
That's amazing. And he was a very clever guy. Like, he was very crafty. I think you called him very crafty in the book.
He was a brilliant spy. Absolutely. He got away with it for 22 years. So to frame his espionage a little bit, Robert Philip Hansen was the spy known only as Gray Suit. What happened was, for years, the FBI, the NSA, the CIA, every intelligence community, every part of the intelligence community, including military intelligence and the White House, were worried about an incredibly high-placed mole somewhere in the intelligence community, but they had no idea where. And they went on a hunt for the spy that was given the code name Gray Suit. And each time the FBI went after someone who could potentially be Gray Suit, they got a derivative code name. So there was a Gray Deceiver, and there were other Grays. Hansen was given the code name Gray Day, which is the title of my book. And he got away with it for 22 years of his 25-year career in the FBI. That meant he was only in the FBI for 3 years before he became a traitor, and volunteered his services to then the Soviet Union, and then spied so long he survived the collapse of the Soviet Union, the reformation into the Russian Federation, and then reactivated himself, continued spying with a brand new spy agency. So you're talking about a guy who knew what he was doing and got away with it for probably the longest shelf life for a spy.
And a lot of money. And he was very, like, in his external career didn't seem to be like super successful in a way. Like, he was a librarian for the State Department and the FBI. Is that right? Like,
yeah. So when I say that I talk about him as a librarian in his own mind. So what he actually was something very significant. He was the top analyst, the special agent, a supervisory special agent, but one of the top and most well-regarded analysts against the Soviet Union and Russia. So he was the guy in counterintelligence who understood intrinsically how the Russians were trying to spy against us. He was able to hunt their spies, and he was able to take a lot of information and was very adept at synthesizing it into actionable intelligence. And so he called it himself a librarian, he thought of himself as a librarian, but actually those analysts are the most critical part of counterintelligence. My job as an undercover field operative was, as an FBI ghost or an investigative specialist, was to be undercover and those analysts would launch us at the targets in order to perform the investigation. But we couldn't do what we do unless the analyst gave us that information.
so he was at a crucial place within the FBI, kind of almost like Kim Philby. I think Kim Philby was also counterintelligence too, if I remember.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? Hansen was very fond of Philby and had followed his career not only as an analyst but a spy. And Hansen, part of becoming an analyst to him was a slight by the FBI. He wanted to be a field operative. He wanted to be the special agent out in the field chasing down spies, not in the behind computer systems and managing paper and figuring out analytically where the spies were, and that made him angry. And when people are angry, they become disgruntled, and when they become disgruntled and they have a severe narcissistic personality, which Hansen had, and then you have a triggering event, which was the need for money. He couldn't afford his life because he insisted to be put on a counterintelligence squad in New York, in the New York field office, which is one of the most expensive field offices on earth to work out of. And he was married and having all these children, couldn't afford his life. So you have narcissism. He's angry at the FBI and he needs money, which is the triggering event. And he decided that instead of going the good path and saying, hey, we need to move outside, farther into the suburbs, maybe into New Jersey, I'll commute. We need to downsize our lives. Maybe I borrow some money from family. I don't know. He decided he was going to just short circuit all that and become a spy. And when he became a spy, he didn't go softly. He went hard. He came right out the gate. And in his first act of espionage, a letter that he wrote to a known intelligence officer who had no idea we knew he was an intelligence officer, right? So that's an act of espionage, just writing to him.
Because he had that information that was coming into the FBI, right?
Exactly.
So he knew, right?
He gave up the name of two of our spies and that Russians who were working for us, and they were executed. So he didn't, and he didn't make $1 for that. So that was just to establish his bona fides.
And so they never really knew his name either. So both the FBI or the intel of the US didn't know who was spying, but he also kind of kept his identity from them too, right? He used a fake name, Roman OB or Roman Garcia or something like that, right?
You're exactly right. He began his career as a spy for the KGB. This is back in the time of the Soviet Union, and when the KGB was the be-all, end-all agency there. He volunteered his services to a known KGB intelligence officer, and then began a series of dead drops and signals and recovering money that their intelligence officer would leave from the embassy in either New York or Washington, D.C., and drop for him. And the consulate in New York, the embassy in Washington, D.C., and then he would make all the calls. So very different from every other spy with the Russians. The Russians like to make all the decisions, right? And they like to know who you are right away so they can exert pressure if you ever decide I don't want to spy anymore. He never let them know his identity. He called all the shots. This is when I'll load a drop. This is when I'll set a signal. This is when you'll pay me. This is how much you'll pay me. And they were getting such incredible information. They didn't want to shake the tree. They didn't want to disturb that goose who was laying the golden eggs. So they let him roll with it, and that protected him. For most of his career, in fact, his entire career as a spy, the Russians never knew who he was. And that's why he was one of the few spies that survived the collapse of the Soviet Union and the reformation into the Russian Federation. What some of your listeners may know, and some might not, is that when the Soviet Union collapsed, the KGB was disbanded. And a lot of those intelligence officers for the KGB were out of a job. And so they stole secrets. They stole from their own agency on their way out the door and sold those secrets to the highest bidder. So a lot of those old Cold War spies were getting caught because former KGB intelligence officers who were angry at being kicked out of their job were selling secrets because that's what they were trained to do. Then the KGB, being disbanded, is reformed with the new Russian Federation into two agencies, the FSB and the SVR. The SVR is kind of like our CIA. The FSB is kind of like our FBI. If our FBI ran around and beat the crap out of people to get information, and those modern agencies now were the agencies that Hansen reactivated himself after a period of dormancy and began to spy again.
He's a really interesting. He really vaunted how intelligent he was, and even as the way that he would talk to you or other people seemed like he was really kind of an intellect. He thought of himself as an intellectual snob. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. He thought of himself that way, but the fact of the matter is he was intelligent. He was very innovative. And one of the things that I did admire about him, because, hey, he was a bad guy. He was a villain. He's my nemesis, right? In my life, that will be my nemesis. But you have to admire certain things. And one thing that I did admire, past the fact that he got away with being America's top spy for 22 years, was the fact that he had great ideas about how the FBI could protect themselves, particularly the fact that the FBI in 2000, 2001 was very deficient in protecting itself from cyber attacks, particularly an internal spy or trusted insider or mole that was stealing through computer systems. Now, of course, one of the reasons that he was so adept at knowing all the ways that this could happen is because he was the guy doing it, right? And laughing in the FBI's face as he was given this brand new role, which was the cover operation to catch him, that put him in charge of building cybersecurity for the FBI.
Wow, it's incredible. So he's getting kind of like this dopamine rush by being smart, but also like trying to outsmart the FBI too. So he's like real. He's also kind of a tough guy too. Like he grew up in Chicago, right? So it's yeah, he was a really interesting character. One of the interesting things about him was his fealty to the Catholic Church. He seemed to be very openly, I mean, externally, like very religious, right?
Yeah, so William, there's a lot to unpack there. So first, yes, he is a very good observation of yours. He certainly he was as a narcissist, he did get that dopamine rush every time he pulled one over at the FBI, knowing that the FBI is the top tier investigative agency in the world. He was incredibly religious. He went to church every single day. He was a member of Opus Dei, which, if you are a Catholic, they are the probably the most Catholic of the Catholics. In fact, I'm a practicing Catholic. I get to church with my family, once a week on Sundays. He thought that made me. He actually called me a junior varsity Catholic and was planning to mentor me into Opus Dei, something I didn't really want to do, but I went with it as part of the investigation, and told me that that's how you join the varsity team. But the way that I describe his faith is he believed his faith, and he wanted people to see him as this upright, ethical, very important person, but he didn't live his faith. He certainly didn't live his faith. He betrayed everything in not only his country, his family, but also his faith. And just one more note, he was a bully. And I think his father was a bully. And when fathers, in particular, of men are bullies, they become bullies. And I quickly learned, as he bullied me in that office, that the thing that you do with a bully is you punch back. Now, I couldn't punch Robert Hansen, but what I did do, and where I started to make some success in the case and in gaining his trust, gaining his respect, was instead of just taking it, I started, responding just as sharp as he was calling me out, and challenging him on virtually everything he said, and that's where I started, I think, gaining his respect.
It's really interesting. Can you talk about what the game plan was for you guys to try to see if he was the mole? Because it was kind of an elaborate ruse, right?
Yeah, so here was the game plan, and it was exceptional luck with a lot of hard work ahead of that. The FBI for years had been looking at the wrong man. In fact, they had been focusing all their efforts on the CIA, and in particular, a case officer there named Brian Kelly. Now, Brian Kelly, poor Brian Kelly, was just a guy in the wrong place in the wrong time. In the wrong time. He lived near Hanson. He had this jogging trail that just he was running, and it happened to go past some of the known Russian drop sites and signal sites. He knew a lot about this case to catch a spy called Felix Bloch, who actually got away. As the legend goes, as the story goes, Felix Bloch, who was a known spy here in the United States, was in Paris and was supposed to make a drop of information to the Russians. And at the last minute in his hotel room, he got a call from his Russian intelligence officer saying, run. And he did. And they never caught him, right? Because they had to catch him red-handed. So the FBI was there. The Paris police were ready. They were moving in on the hotel, and he runs out the back door. He gets away. Brian Kelly worked Felix Bloch. He was the CIA person who had a lot of information on that. It turns out that Robert Hansen was the guy who sent a drop to Russia saying, you've got to tell this guy to run. We're moving in on Felix Bloch. And that was the reason. So the FBI is going after Brian Kelly, and they're not finding anything. They're tearing his life apart. They're desperate to try to prove that he is Grace Suit. and they're not able to do it. So what they do is the FBI and CIA get together finally, and they create this joint task force to go to Russia and find a source who might give them information that would prove that it was this CIA individual. And a source steps forward and says, "Hey, I hear you want some information. I'm former KGB, and I raided a file cabinet as I was kicked out of the KGB, and I've just been hiding it in, my attic for a rainy day. I've decided I'd like to come to America and live someplace warm. I'd like $14 million, somewhere around that, to sell this file of information for you." They arranged to meet. They took a look at the info, said this is worth it. They bought that file of $14 million. And here's the coolest thing, William. This is why I love this guy. This former KGB guy now is in witness protection because, Putin is brutal against traitors. He comes, he goes and moves somewhere warm. I can't tell you anything about where he is. He's hidden away. And he has two kids that are about to go to college. And he says, part of my deal, I want guaranteed college of my choice in the US for my two kids, tuition fully paid by the government, and I don't have to submit a single application. I've got a daughter who just got into college. I got a son who's right around the way, and I think that's worth more than the 14 million at this point. Getting into college is so hard. So he's gone. They open this file of information, and in the file is a cassette tape, a bunch of letters, and a trash bag. And you got to build a case for that. So they do. They assume it's going to point to this poor guy, Brian Kelly. Instead, when they run fingerprints on the trash bag that Hansen had used to wrap one of his drops to the Russians in the past, it comes up a partial match. When they listen to the cassette tape, it was one of Hansen's big mistakes. He calls the Russian consulate and says, I left you my secrets. They disappeared. This is Ramon Garcia. And I went to look for my money and I couldn't find it. Where's my 50 grand? And they, of course, record because they have no idea who he is. And they're really excited. This is Ramon Garcia. It's the first, contact like this they've ever had. And that cassette tape just goes into a vault and disappears when this KGB officer grabbed it. And then they read the letters and they do some print analysis and language analysis. And there's a lot of statements in there that sound a lot like Robert Hansen. And all the hearts fell in that little room of agents and CIA officers who retrieved that information, because not only was Hansen one of the top analysts for Russia, at one point, the FBI had gone to him as the top analyst and said, "Hey, we've been trying to catch this guy, Gray Suit, forever. You know more about the Russians than anybody. Who do you think it is?" And Hansen gave them a list of like 100 names. And they went on this years of wild goose chases, chasing down all these names. And he just sat there laughing at his desk as they looked everywhere but him. So, yeah, they asked him to catch himself. That's the best place in the world to be if you're a spy.
It's incredible. So he had to have started in the late 80s or something. I mean, and you were young too. This is interesting, is that he's kind of like an old veteran headed towards retirement almost. When you got on the scene, you're straight out of Quantico and going to night school, law school, right at GW, right?
Right. So yeah, there was a great dichotomy in our experience. Hansen was at the very twilight of his career. FBI agents, unless you have some additional detail, there's mandatory retirement at 25 years. Unless there's serious exigent circumstances that require you to be back in, or you're going to cycle to Quantico and teach or something like that. So this is December, early December, that we even learn he's potentially the spy, with circumstantial evidence that we get from a KGB source that's never taking the stand, or he would be killed. I like to joke that he'd wake up one morning and eat a plutonium muffin, because that's the way that Putin takes care of these guys. And
Poison.
yeah. And then he is going to retire in April. So they have months to build a investigation, and they do it in weeks. They built a brand new section in the FBI called the Information Assurance Section under the Science and Technology Division. They create this position for Hansen where he will ostensibly build cybersecurity for the FBI right under a new assistant director who came from IBM, who is in charge of innovating the FBI and bringing them into the modern computer era. And he's going to have staff. So he's going to have a secret secure room, offices on the ninth floor of FBI headquarters, promoted to executive service, given a massive pay bump, given a bigger title as a section chief, and get to extend his time in the FBI. It's like they took every different benefit that they'd never given him for his entire career that he'd been demanded and gave it to him at the very last moment. And then the FBI looks around for a special agent who is specifically trained in undercover operations that require elicitation. And elicitation is you and I, William, are having a conversation, but I have a ulterior purpose of trying to draw secrets out of you without you knowing. And that's a very particular skill. And they couldn't find a single agent trained in elicitation in these kind of undercover face-to-face operations that knew how to turn on a computer. The FBI was just so behind in computerization. There were still agents who were typing stuff up on typewriters in 2000, I'm embarrassed to say. So they went deeper into the ghosts. I was a 5-year veteran of undercover field operations. I could follow you from sunup to sundown. You would never know I was there. If you saw me 3 times over the course of a day, I changed. I had a different disguise every time. I knew all the best technology to track and surveil a target. I could even listen to you sleep, right? And yeah, but I'd never been face to face with a target like this in an investigation like this. No one from the ranks of the investigative specialists ever had. But I knew how to turn a computer on. I was an old hacker, just like Hansen was, and it takes a hacker to catch a hacker. So they just threw me in this vault, room 9930 in FBI headquarters, which is called a SCIF, which stands for a sensitive compartmented information facility, which means that it is a facility, a room where you are allowed to see the highest levels of classified information that the nation has, if you have a need to know, if you can see it. And they slammed that vault door and really just hoped I came out okay. And I did.
Yeah, and I mean, just being up close to him or that time, the observances about his character and how he moved and he stumbled, and that whole scene you talk about where he opens the triptych and starts praying like the rosary, it's really something else. Like he's really, I mean, the Doctor Death, the mortician, was quite a character. I mean, to be locked in there with him must have been something else, right?
Yeah, it was serious. It was a serious job to be locked in there. And in the beginning, you have to imagine Hansen walking into his dream job at the very end of his career, and he had to be thinking, he had to be absolutely suspicious that this was a trap. I mean, he is the nation's top spy. He knows it. He doesn't know we know it. And he only had one point of attack to clean himself, and that was me. This young guy who's thrown in there with him. I could demonstrate very quickly that I knew the business of computerization. I could code. I understood the basics of cybersecurity. And so, I could do the job, the actual job of building cybersecurity. And that was our overt job. I had to do that too. We actually had meetings with vendors and explored technology and went through demonstrations of new tech and what the FBI was looking to do. So there was this overt job. And then I had the covert job of one, and this is how the FBI put it: don't screw up, right? That was number one. Don't make a mistake that makes him realize that this is an investigation. And there were actually 3 squads at this point of FBI agents working different areas. And one was working, looking into his finances. One was looking into his background, and one was running this operation in FBI headquarters, basically running me. And the other 2 squads bet this squad running me, at least they bet on me, right? That I would be the one who caused the whole thing to fall apart. Bet money. I didn't know about this. Nobody let me in. I guess they don't want you betting on yourself. But they, my number one was don't screw up. Number two, gain his trust, which was more difficult than you could think. And number three, find the smoking gun in the case that's going to lead to his arrest. And watch any CSI or crime show. This is impossible. This is like asking me to follow someone all day and never get made alone, right? It's incredibly difficult. So I had an impossible task in front of me. At the same time, I had just been married. When my boss showed up at my house early on a Sunday morning to pull me into the most sophisticated and sensitive case the FBI's ever run, I was married, I think, like 3 months to the day almost. So I couldn't tell my wife anything that I was doing. She thought I got a promotion to a computer job at headquarters so that I could make all of my law school classes at night. and I ended up working way more than I did when I was one of the top tier undercover operatives for the FBI. And I couldn't tell her a thing about what I was doing. So I was lying to her constantly. And at the same time, I had to hold everything together every time I was across that desk from Hanson. So
And you had to
it was
make
pretty
reports
difficult.
every night too. So they expected you to kind of do a daily debrief, right?
Yes, every night I would actually debrief with a special agent named Kate, who was my handler. She would actually drive me to law school. So we'd wait till Hanson was out. He was in pocket with the team, and then I would leave FBI headquarters after him. He had a rule I had to be there before him every day, and I couldn't leave until he left. And then once he left, she would pick me up around the corner from headquarters and we would debrief on the drive over to law school. Then I'd sit through 2 hours of law school classes and, kind of half listen and furiously write up my notes for the day in a spiral notebook, right? And then I'd get home, see my wife for like 10 minutes. It was so late. She'd go to sleep. I would pretend to go to sleep. As soon as I knew she was asleep, I'd sneak out of bed, go pull out a laptop, type up my log for the day, everything that I had seen and observed with Hanson for the analysts, save it on a floppy disk, and then I'd hand that disk to Kate the next night and over again. So I was getting maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, if on a good night, and perpetually exhausted.
And the surveillance people were watching him go to parks and do things with flashlights. So they were suspicious of him once they put him under surveillance, right?
Yeah, so he was under surveillance when he wasn't in the office with me. And one of the things I would do is I would call him out to surveillance so they'd know to get ready. And as we got closer to a potential drop, he was casing the parks where he would make that drop. He was looking for signals for the Russians in preparation for the drop. And the thing about foot surveillance and vehicular surveillance is it can be a little bit of a crapshoot. With a highly trained operative like Hansen, you have to be incredibly careful. You cannot make a single mistake, one mistake by surveillance asset, and all he has to do is just not make the drop, and then we have nothing. So they had to let him go a lot, and we were not confident that our surveillance teams would be able to take him to that eventual drop. So I had to win in that office with him.
Right. So it's just, and what was the real thing where you realized? Yeah, there was a sequence in there that they wanted you to get his keys. I found that very interesting. They wanted his keys for some reason. Why?
Yeah,
Why
they
did they?
wanted his keys because they wanted to break into his house, and they didn't want to use any intrusion methods because the guy was so savvy and well trained. It's possible he could have seen that someone used a lockpick, so they were very careful. And if they got their keys, and then finally they were like, I felt terrible. I never got his keys. They were always on his person, always in his pocket. He'd jiggle them as he walked down the hall. It drove me crazy. Um, and um, uh, and they finally said, you know what? There's so many people who lives in his house. There's never no one there, so we probably couldn't have done anything with the keys anyway. So don't worry about it. But I was ready with an impression box if I could ever get the keys to make a quick copy and get them back. And he always had them. But I did get his Palm Pilot, and that's how we caught him.
The Palm Pilot was it, right? This early technology, which is hard to believe. It was high technology back then, right? But this,
Yeah,
like,
let me here. This is a
for
Palm Pilot. You see that? So you basically flip this sucker open, and you have this thing called let's see if it's in there, a stylus. Well, my stylus is elsewhere, but you would just tap this sucker, and that's how you got the data. And this is a Palm 3X, and this is the Palm 3X that was used by Chris Cooper in the movie Breach. And I got it at the close of production, and Hanson loved it. He kept it in his left back pocket, and every time he sat down, he'd pull it out of his back pocket and put it in his bag right next to him. And every time he stood up like clockwork, he'd grab it out of the pocket and out of the bag and put it back in his back pocket over and over and over again. That's a routine. And so I said, we got to get it away from him. Problem is, it's always in his pocket. So what we did is they had a section chief, and this is like a pivotal story in the book, a section chief and a assistant director they didn't like. And if you read my book, you'll learn all the reasons for this. It has to do with a nighttime operation where I had to steal art. I'll leave it at that. And the section chief and assistant director coming unannounced, slapped $20 on the desk, and they challenge him to go shoot, and he's mad, and this breaks his routine. He didn't like being interrupted. He didn't like people over him in the chain of command, and he forgets to grab the palm pilot. So he goes all the way. They go all the way from the ninth floor down to the shooting range in the sub basement, and they're shooting. I know they're down there. An asset tells me. I grab the palm pilot. I run down 3 flights of stairs to the 6th floor, where a tech team's just been sitting there waiting. Hand it off, and they start copying a palm pilot, a data card, and a floppy disk, all of which I grabbed from his bag. And as they're doing it, he's on his way back up. He took some shots at his target. I think maybe he touched his bottom, realized I don't have my palm pilot. Do I really trust Eric? And abruptly leaves. So he's on his way up. I'm 3 stories down, and I'm pretty nervous. And I tell the guys, like, I need this stuff back. And they're like, don't worry about it. We're almost done. I said, you don't understand. He's armed. I'm not. He's angry. I'm not going to win here. He's going to shoot me. I get it back. I run up 3 flights of steps. I get to his bag, and then I realize there are 4 pockets, and I have 3 devices, and I have no clue which pocket they all go into. And I hear him coming through the door.
It's an amazing story. The fact that you're right there. I mean, this is happening in like a lot of other different spies or have. There's Aldrich Ames, if I remember. You mentioned somebody who I didn't know the name of, Pitts, too. So
right. Earl Pitts was a Cold War spy who got away until we got some information later. And this was right as I joined the FBI in the at around, I think, 94, they learned of him. And I came right onto a squad that was doing the investigation to catch him in 95. And it was my first opportunity to be part of what's called a false flag operation. They sent a FBI agent who spoke fluent Russian to Earl Pitt's door and said, we want to reactivate you. And he thought he was spying for the Russians, but really he was spying for the FBI. And it became a challenge. Like, what can we get him to do next? And he worked in the behavioral science section at Quantico. And it was my first chance to do a little undercover work and learn how a squad works right out of Quantico.
right, that's like the famous Mindhunters section. Is that it's Wrestler and Douglas came out of
right, and that section that caught Earl Pitts, that's Mike Donner, who's the original FBI spy hunter.
Oh, wow.
I was his protege. I learned everything everything that I learned to catch a spy from him.
Was Mike Donner. I remember reading his name. It's an amazing story. Hanson's really something else. And then he ends up with like 15 life sentences and right. I mean, it's just a great story. I recommend people get this book. It's 5-star. I give it a 5-star. I bought it. I'll give it a 5-star review when we're done. But this was a book you published in 2021.
Actually, 2019.
19. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I got it wrong. But then you have a more recent book. Let me bring the cover up. People get this book, but the new one is called Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. Can you talk about the research that led up to your more recent book?
Certainly. So I'm an author and a keynote speaker, and I started doing an enormous number of keynotes, talks to these large audiences on cybersecurity. And one of the main reasons for that is my theories on cybersecurity are that if we want to stop cyber attacks, and this includes cybercrime and espionage, we have to think like spy hunters. We need to use counterintelligence to inform cybersecurity. And I started working with the major cybersecurity companies to bring my background in counterintelligence, catching spies, into stopping cyber attacks. And so over the years, as I spoke to audiences and I was doing research and I was analyzing all of the different ways that cybercrime in particular has grown to the 3rd largest economy on earth. Right now, the cost of cybercrime moving through the dark web is somewhere between 14 trillion and 18 trillion dollars and growing towards 20 trillion dollars in the next few years. That is easily the 3rd largest economy on earth and bigger than the 3rd and 4th largest, which right now are actually Los Angeles and Germany. So that's an immense amount of wealth that is being stolen by cybercrime globally. And so I wanted to write a book that is, one, really fun and thrilling. A number of top tier authors who write, these best-selling novels about espionage, and like for example, Brad Thor with his Nate Horvath books, said that it reads like a thriller because I wrote it like that. There's a through story from behind my eyes, just like in Grey Day, of a company I was working with directly to stop a ransomware attack from a Russian cybercrime group, and how we did it and how we survived, and what the people felt like going through it. But what I did is I took everything I learned at Quantico and as a undercover operative in counterintelligence, and I divided the way that cyber criminals have learned from spies to launch their attacks into 6 buckets. So it's deception, infiltration, impersonation attacks, confidence schemes attacks, exploitation, and destruction. And if you spell it out, the acronym is DICED. And I, through storytelling, show all the different ways that cyber criminals are coming after us, right? And with a lot of personal stories too, including a story about how I almost got completely railroaded by a cybercrime group who had this brilliant attack that almost got me. Just so I can say, if it happened to me, it can happen to you. And then the second half of the book uses the same stories, but how you could defeat these attacks with some additional stories from my time in the FBI, in my methodology to stop cyber attacks. And that's called PAID, because everybody wants to get paid. Prepare, assess, investigate, and decide. So it's a really cool story about how cybercrime has evolved from espionage, how cyber criminals have created these gangs, the new mafia, that have hired intelligence officers to make them better at what they do, how they're
Wow.
using deepfakes and AI to really fool us in ways that are so innovative we don't see it coming, and what you can do to make yourself safe from these attacks.
Wow. So they're using other ex intel people to make their crimes better. Wow, that's amazing. I'm
Well,
not
yeah,
surprised though.
in fact, they hire active intelligence officers, right? Who are using this as their side gig. So they're the top tier spies for Russia and China and Iran and North Korea and all sorts of countries that want to do the West harm. And as they're launching their espionage attacks, they're working with cybercrime groups, right, and making money on the side. And of course, their agencies don't care as long as they attack the West and not their country. And of course they're not declaring it with taxes because it's criminal. So they're making a ton of money on their side gig, and we're all suffering for it.
It's incredible. I've heard like the income in India for some of their online stuff is like in the tens of billions of dollars. It's just an incredible sum.
Yeah,
These on phone scammers and stuff like that. That's just a piece of the puzzle. There's all kinds of phishing things out there, data stealing. I think a lot of our, some a lot in the United States, like they're saying the loss of fraud, it would probably include cybercrime in the US, is close to $1 trillion a year. It's unbelievable.
easily,
Wow.
and
Well, I
I
think
would
so.
suspect that it is far more than that, probably at
Wow.
least 5 to 10x, because
Wow.
remember, that's only what's reported, and only a small percentage of people actually report when they suffer this crime, and not all companies report, even when it is a large sum of money, because then that has all sorts of regulatory problems behind it. So yeah, anything you see, any statistic you see, you just want to multiply it by your favorite number because so much of this goes unreported.
Wow, that's incredible. I heard of some guy like in Estonia was sending fake bills to Facebook and they would just pay it. And he
Yeah,
made like,
I tell that story. So
oh,
it
okay.
wasn't just Facebook, it was Facebook, Google, Microsoft. It was a number of big top tier companies. And this is what's called an invoice scam. And I tell a great story about an invoice scam, a real invoice scam in the book. Essentially, what they do is they learn about vendors that the big company uses. And then what they do, and they even do this to small businesses, and they pretend it's an imposter scam. They pretend they are that vendor, right? So they do research on you. You know that, okay, Google, Facebook uses this vendor, like 100 times a year for catering at events, right? And so what they do is they get an invoice and they create a full fake invoice. They use AI to do it. And then they send the invoice with a phone number. And when the person looks at it and says, oh, I don't really recognize this one, they call the number, and then they have a very savvy person respond and say, hey, yeah, no, we were there. It was this event, and they're looking at a real event. And then the person just processes it because they're processing hundreds of invoices a day. And it can be a massive amount of money that is stolen from companies with just a simple attack.
It's just incredible. I mean, this is like whole industries, guys, like phone banks and very sophisticated. What's that movie, The Sting? It's like The Sting or something, but modern over.
Exactly. And that's my point. William, that's exactly my point. These are just old school traditional espionage techniques uh, in a modern era, using computer systems not to attack you and me and everybody listening right now, but your computer, but to attack you. So they're just, because we're online so much, because we spend so much time on the internet, because a lot of our connection today, even in businesses where you might not even know the person you work with or have never met them face to face, because so much of what we do in all aspects of our lives are online, what criminals do is find incredibly clever ways to insert themselves into that. And deepfakes are the big next iteration of this. These AI deepfakes, just wait until our next election here in the US. It is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be bananas, because we are going to see deepfakes of politicians saying things that they never said, and causing all sorts of chaos.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I mean, when I have to look at stuff now, I have to go, is this AI or not? Like as a journalist, I have to figure out, is this real? Which I never used to do 3, 4 years ago. Like, are these
Yeah.
pictures? Yeah. So,
Well,
wow.
one statistic that I give in the book, a prediction I've made, is that by the end of this year, we're in 2026, right? 90% of what we see on the internet will be in some way, shape, or form synthetic, which means that 90% of what we see when you're scrolling through Instagram or TikTok, when you're reading things on LinkedIn or on the internet, when you're reading things that are published by traditional media, a portion of that is going to be written, produced, created by AI. And now we're even seeing full accounts, right? Where everything is AI. The content is AI, the video is AI, the voiceover is AI. And there's going to be more and more and more about it, because it's marketable and it's easy, and you can hide behind an avatar. You don't have to stand up like I am right here and do this. And sometimes on stage, I take a break and grab a sip of water, and I have my AI avatar just say the next like 10 lines in my keynote, just to prove to people the fidelity and the expressiveness of AI video. And if
Wow.
I'm, like I was in Brazil a few weeks ago, and I had my AI avatar just speak in Portuguese in my voice, my exact voice. I don't speak a word of it. Did like 5 minutes of the keynote for me, and really scared
Wow. That's
that audience.
scary. Scary. They're doing it for scheduling now. So I get these AI kind of emails.
Yes.
I've heard your show. This is it. So they're thinking watching my show, AI is, and then sending out like a teaser email. It's fine, but it's just shows like it's starting to pervade even kind of my career, but
Yeah, it's everywhere.
it's everywhere. So the diced model, and then the solution is paid, PIED. So that's what's in
Paid.
spies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, it's that memorable.
Yeah.
And the, one of the most edifying things as an author and as a thought leader in cybersecurity for me is that I have heard from thousands of people who've read the book, and then they write me. I have a weekly newsletter that is free. Anybody can jump on. It's just ericoneil.net/newsletter that keeps the book going. So what I do is I write a story about a cyber attack, and I have like the cybersecurity tip of the day and the AI technology feature of the day and all sorts of things. And what I do is I have a constant communication with my readers and with people who subscribe to the newsletter. And what I've heard from so many people is, I read your book, and then this is the cyber attack that I caught. I wasn't fooled because I remembered this, or I wasn't fooled because I thought of this. I didn't give in to the pressure. I didn't give in to the urgency. I took your tip to, if something looks too good to be true, it probably isn't. And that's what makes me feel really good as a thought leader, that people are not falling to scams. Because the only way that we can stop cyber attacks is by drying up the dark web. The criminals only win if they get paid. And if we catch them, if we stop the cyber attack, if we don't send them money, then they're going to have to go get real jobs. And that's my hope. That's my goal.
It's really important. These kind of ideas and the stuff in the book, the most recent book, is really important to inoculate, because I spend time. I have elderly parents and other people. Like, is this real? What's this? Like, I'm even confused. Like, they're super confused because somebody from the so-called Social Security will call them like, "You're going to lose your Social Security if you don't send us back this right now." So sometimes they get scared of there's little hooks, but I think that's really elder crime or elder abuse online it's real.
Yes. Our elders and our teenagers are two of the biggest demographics that are preyed upon by cyber criminals. In fact, I tell every parent that get my book and sit down with your teenager and read chapter 13 on exploitation. It will save their life. There are cases where what cyber criminals do, and I'll get to elders in a minute, but what cyber criminals do is they especially go after teenage boys, and they create accounts or they steal accounts of attractive teenage girls, and they start chatting. And sometimes they'll take entire days or weeks to what we call grooming, to get them to feel like they're in a flirtatious environment. And then the fake AI sends a naked picture and says it's your turn. And then now you're not talking to the cute flirtatious person online anymore. You're talking to a cyber criminal who then says, I've got your naked picture. Here it is. I've sent it back to you with a collage of everyone you know. We know where they all are. We have all their email addresses. And if you don't pay us money, I am going to send this picture to your parents, all your classmates, your grandma, everyone. We know them all, right? We know where you go to school. We know everything about you. And in some cases, I think there have been a few dozen in the last few years. The young person commits suicide because of the horror and the fear and the shame. So, that's in there too, like what you can do with your teenager to make sure that they know they can come to you to avoid these things in the first place. I raised my kids, with the idea that if you're talking to someone online, they're not a real person. Unless you know them, you've met them, and you've touched them at some point. Otherwise, don't give up any information or secrets. For elders, elders are very susceptible to romance fraud, where an entire AI avatar gets them to fall in love, and then there's some urgent, terrible crisis, and I need money now. But also financial fraud. I tell a story of a grandfather who was completely caught up by somebody who was his friend and worked at an investment company, and then got him to invest and actually showed him this very slick website that showed his investments going up 200, 300% until he put his entire pension in, and then the criminal disappeared with all his money. There are cases, and I just wrote this in a recent newsletter, of cyber criminals who are pretending they're the IRS or some bill collector, who get an elder person to be so afraid that they're about to get arrested that they literally stay on the phone with the cyber criminal while they go to their bank, withdraw, $2,000, and then take that bank to a cryptocurrency ATM, type in the keys for the cyber criminal's digital wallet, and then insert all their money in the ATM. This happens so much that every time I see a cryptocurrency ATM, I go to my car and I get a piece of paper and I write on the note, do not put money on this. It's a scam. It's a scam, and I tape it to the ATM.
Eric, I've seen like multiple videos of old ladies all panicking, shoving money into a crypto ATM.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It's on my social media. It's incredible.
So, one of my tips in the book is for your grandparents, for those elders, get them a buddy. I happen to be the buddy for like everyone in my family, but they need a buddy. So, somebody who's very cyber aware, works in IT, or you're just your most hard-nosed, stubborn person. And then let them know that this is the person you call or text, night or day, doesn't matter what time, to say, hey, I received this offer. Oh my God, my computer just froze and there's a pop-up that says, call this number for tech support. Or, I'm getting a call from the IRS and they're telling me I have to go put money in an ATM, right? Yeah, you need to be, they need that person that they can call right away to get that second level of, authentication or second look at it.
For sure. Eric, we are at the 50-minute mark. Do you have time for a few comments? A lot of people are really saying you're awesome.
Yeah, I would love to take as much time as you want, William.
There might be some questions too, but Jug says, looks like I'm buying another book.
Hey,
sounds good.
Awesome.
You already bought it.
Right on.
Jack says, great guest. Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks for tuning in. Jug also said, one reason I like your show, William, is you always get good book recommendations. I highly recommend the first and second book, so go check it out. Jack says, great interview. Thank you. Is this the Robert Hansen? Yeah, it's 2 S's. But yeah, I mean, it's a first person. This is the expert on Robert Hansen guy. This is the guy who was literally in a room, stuck in a skiff with him.
Yep.
Special facilities. So
sensitive compartmented information facility. It's one of those FBI acronyms.
Kill Bale says, great, thanks. FBI, some great surveillance personnel. This is a lot about surveillance too. So Do you know if what happened to Hansen and his family? Are you familiar with kind of his story after his arrest?
Well, for Jack Delaney's question, I'm still married. I have
Oh,
three children, so yeah, we stayed together. If you watch the movie Breach, people worry that I didn't stay married. Hansen actually did. His wife and she practiced that religion. You don't get divorced in Opus Dei. She stayed married to him. He passed away in Supermax prison in June of 2023 of natural causes. And I heard from someone that I trust in the FBI. This is unverified, but that he had donated a kidney to a family member and he died of complications to that. So at least he did some good on his way out. Um, but yeah, he stayed married to his wife until he died.
I'll have to get this book, says Kill Bill. I can't believe these guys beat the random pollies. I've had drinks at the boardroom at Quantico. He mentions the boardroom. I think you
Yeah, so
actually
I
mentioned
mentioned
it.
the boardroom, and you're gonna have to get my book to get the
Yeah.
story that takes place in the boardroom over drinks of how I got my code name in the FBI, which is Werewolf.
Ex KGB were doing stuff in the Seattle area. I think they were around. There's a lot of influence operations. You even mentioned those in your book too, if I recollect.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are tons of them.
Barto asks, has Eric met John Kiriakou yet? I think they could put together some very interesting material. I think he's ex-CIA. Have you heard
Yeah,
of John?
I haven't met him, but I do love to do those collaborations, and I do them with a lot of people that came from my world.
Great. Wake Bonk says Buenos noches from Sweden. Nice to catch William live. Thanks, Sweden. These chats are crazy. They're all international. So
That's awesome.
yeah, Wake Bonk. God bless you here. Telegraphic asks, I think this is a question for you, Eric. What do you see for the societal cultural effects with synthetic and fake content in the next 5 years?
I love this question. I think it's going to get worse and worse. I think it's going to get much harder. It already is to determine what is fake and what is real. During the holiday season, I was doing a lot of media and all the big media programs on holiday scams, how to protect yourself. And one of my number one tips was, you know, if you could go to a store and buy it, do that, because there you're not getting scammed, right? Go back to face to face, go back to person. Now, in the next 5 years, I suspect, and I know because I'm working with a lot of these cyber companies and very innovative ones, we're all going to have a layer of a technology that is on our computers, our phones, our tablets, and everywhere that we access the internet that is going to scan and tell us this is 99% AI. This is, 5% AI, to at least give us a little bit of help. But most important is you need to not trust anything you see online unless you can verify it, and always go with very trusted sources when you're buying something or when you're absorbing content. A lot of what we see online, especially in social media, it looks very real, but it might not be.
I mean, and this is your website, so people who are watching this live or on YouTube or X can see that, and it shows that you can book Eric, and I think is that the best way to contact you if anybody has any
Yeah,
additional questions?
if you click that book, Eric, it goes to my contact page, and then you can say, "Hey, I'm media. I want you to be on a show," or "Hey, I've got a keynote. I want you to come up here," or "I just have a question for Eric," and then it'll send it to the right people. And if you say, "I have a question for Eric," it comes right to me. And I do. It sometimes takes a little bit, but I do respond to everyone. And then the best thing to do is if you click that banner at the top, and this is ericoneal.net, and where it says "Start here" with the little fire emojis on the side, and my webmaster is pretty awesome. That'll take you directly to my newsletter. You can sign up for free. All you got to do is drop an email in there, and I hope you all do. I don't use your information for anything. I don't sell it. It's just to create a community of people who want to stay safe and talk about spies and espionage and that kind of cool stuff. And we have a very good time over there as a community that is really fascinated by these undercover operations. I write it weekly, so it only hits your new inbox once a week, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or anything I missed? I mean, your books are in multiple formats, at least on Amazon, Kindle, audio, hardcover,
Right.
right.
Well, one thing I'll tell you, a lot of people love audiobooks, and especially when I'm traveling, I love listening to audiobooks. And if you like my voice or you want to hear my stories, which are a lot of them are first person read by me, I sat down and did the recording in the studio for both books, Gray Day and Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. So it is read by the author, which I think, for audiobooks is the best way to go.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for the chat. Thanks for the great comments, everybody. And today the guest is Eric O'Neill, Oneill. We talked about 2 books. The first one I'll bring up, the cover is Gray Day. Get this book. The reviews are stellar on this. Full title is Gray Day, My Undercover Mission to Expose America's First Cyber Spy. He was in the J. Edgar Hoover building with Hansen, which is really incredible. And then his new book, 2025, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, Cybersecurity Tactics to Outsmart Hackers and Disarm Scammers, because there's a lot of hackers and scammers out there. So, and the target seems to be the United States. So everybody, be careful. And I'll put a link to Eric's, let's see if I can get this up, Eric's website right here. So that's it. But
yeah,
great
perfect.
books. Really enjoyed reading through Gray Day, and you're a great speaker as well. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
William, thanks for having me on, and everybody out there, I hope you check out my books, but most importantly, stay safe out there.
Yeah, amen. All right. Okay, we are no longer